If you are looking for the cheapest place to retire across the whole state of Florida for 2024, then look no further, my friend. We have got the solution right here. And in today's video, we're not just talking cheapest. We're talking the cheapest places where you actually want to move to. This isn't just cheap for cheap's sake. This is more affordable versions in the best place to live across the whole Sunshine State. The Southwest Gulf Coast, the Atlantic, South Florida itself, and Miami, Northeast, the Panhandle, and everything in between. So I hope you enjoy this very analytical, driven take. If you do, please consider subscribing. And either way, make sure you get your hands on our brand new flipbook version of our Southwest Florida relocation guide. It's in the description box below. I'll link it right here and in the outro of the video. So that's the best thing to do next. And again, my name is Adam Hancock. This is the Florida Relocation Guide. Let's hop in. Okay, the first one on my list in no particular order, we are going to the Tampa Bay, Florida Metro to a city called Sun City Center. And the reason this would even end up on your radar at all most likely is you have centered in on this part of the Gulf Coast. You are looking at Tampa Bay versus Sarasota versus Naples. And Tampa's the anomaly in that conversation because the latter two, more traditional retirement towns, a little smaller, coastal and all that, but different. Tampa offers the satiation of lifestyle, social entertainment, sporting events in a greater way than those other two can. So if you're from a larger city or a perspective where the leap to a smaller beach town might be too much for you, then this is a real gem. Now, once you've got your head around that, then one of the most interesting ways to get affordability, to stay kind of in close proximity to all the stuff you'd want across Tampa Bay, and then also importantly to get suburban housing, because you get closer to any urban metro, you're going to get bungalows and crawl spaces and less size, more money a lot of times, is to go east. And the first level of going east when you're talking about Tampa City Center is to an area that involves Brandon, Riverview, and Progress Village. And that's just kind of the closest version of all that kind of stuff. So let's say 15 minutes, you're to what most of Tampa Bay deems important, which is almost like a 4 or 5 stretch on the interstate idea. From exit 39 to 44, you have South Tampa, Hyde Park Village, the International Mall, the large mall with Bay Plaza. You have the West Shore Mall right down the street from that. You have the River District, downtown Tampa, Lightning Stadium, the Buck Stadium, Spring Training Baseball, Ybor City. You go on and on and on, but most of that's a jam right in here. And then the beaches are a separate thing. So you're 15 minutes from all of that, but you get housing that you cannot get in that particular area. Now, once that's being set, then there's always a plan B or C version of that. And the reason that you would go to a different area if you're trying to get this value is, one, these areas happen first. That's where everybody goes. So maybe they're more mature, you get less new construction, things like that. But a lot of times, what if you want an extra layer of affordability and all of that kind of stuff, and you're okay with sacrificing 10 more minutes? That's where Sun City Center comes into play. Because if you could have everything that I'm about to say in option A, geography, would you choose it? Most people would. But option B of going 30 minutes instead of 15 minutes to the stuff, you could save $50,000 to $100,000. You could get new construction and lagoons and things that they don't do anymore because those other areas possibly matured already. That's where this one starts its conversation of evolution and value to me, and that's where we kick it off. When it comes to pricing, I went with a lag quarterly view. Things have been moving like crazy over the last few years. I thought this was the most realistic and a big enough chunk of time. Median sales price was my indicator instead of average to take out some anomalies. As you can see here, Sun City Center, very realistic way to get in the mid 300,000s for retirement, even trending down and potentially creep in and out of low 300,000. That's in juxtaposition to Riverview. It's just one example that sits right above it, like I mentioned, $75,000 to $80,000 in premium. Tampa's even more aggressive than that. And then, anywhere you look, it's never just the one. So the sister and brother cities to Sun City Center would be Wamama, would be Ruskin, amongst a couple others. And you can have some advantages when it comes to those in general. Now, the second big thing about this area is there is land here. There is land here. So that what comes with that one advantage is new construction. And if you're relocating logistically or you're interested in like partial year vacancies or any of that kind of stuff, big advantage here, and especially affordable advantage because Lennar, D.R. Horton, Centex, a lot of the more affordable inventory, like no frills builders have come here. They've even done some lovely 55 and up concepts, crystal water lagoons, things like that. And that's going to be probably more abundant because you can't shove this stuff into areas that already existed a lot of times beyond urban infill. That's 2. And then 3, if you look at the location here, it hugs the bay. So one of the negatives to being central hugging the bay here is you kind of lose proximity to the beaches because you can't get over there unless you have a ferry. You got to go down to Bradenton and up, or you got to go over to Tampa and down because you got to get to bridges. So if that's a negative, you accidentally also creep here as a positive, if you look at it that way, to Sarasota proximity. So you sit about the same distance of downtown Tampa as you sit south to Lakewood Ranch. And Lakewood Ranch is one of the top master plan communities in the United States. Ton going on there. It's a world of its own. So I would say this falls in a bucket to end as not that close to anything, but kind of close to everything. Number 2, we are staying on the Gulf Coast, heading slightly south to Sarasota, Florida's metro, and talking Port Charlotte. Now, where we must start is the central northwest area of the Sarasota city limits. This is where I grew up. I spent most of my youth in Sarasota, so I'm intimately familiar. But there's a 6-mile square radius that basically involves most of the value now and all of the historic value, basically. I call it the magical triangle. So you have downtown Sarasota on the mainland point. You shoot to the first barrier island, Siesta Key, a lovely area, world famous, 7-mile-long barrier island, shopping, dining, free beaches, etc. And then the northern point of the triangle that's on the water is what I consider lower Longboat Key and Lido Key. So within this small area, you have bay, you have Gulf beaches, you have shopping, dining, art, and culture. And, you know, art really pops out because you have the John Ringling Museum, the John Ringling, like, kind of migration over there. And it's considered the cultural coast because you have the highest density of theaters, art galleries, and everything that's related to that category in a pretty small geographic area. All right, so then what next, right? Well, like a lot of places, and especially since this one's a little simpler than Tampa, it's smaller. So like, everything ripples off of that basically. And you're gonna really see the evolution of where I derive a lot of value, which again, if you're not super familiar with the state, is a fantastic way to learn, because I think this rule is like up there with the golden rule. It holds true if you cascade my methodology of thought, if it makes any sense, across the entire state. It really does hold true. So if you go south of this idea, you hit an area called Venice. And Venice, when I was growing up, a little sleepier, a little older, still just as coastal, but because it got 45 minutes one way from all of that, if you deem the first thing I said valuable, it was also a little cheaper. So it made it also really popular for retirement because people didn't want to be necessarily in the thick of it. So the alternative, it was a juxtaposition of value. Well, if you go even south of Venice, then you get a more extreme version of everything I'm saying. So you're cascading down A, B, C, and you hit an area called Englewood. There's nothing really below Englewood. It's further than Venice and even further than Sarasota, a little sleepier and even more cheap, even cheaper. And then that brings us to Port Charlotte, which is the center of this topic. And Port Charlotte is basically eastern Englewood. So if this is A and that's B and that's C, then Port Charlotte's either C minor or it's D. And what's really important to note here is that there's no right or wrong. It's basically, if you understand the most biased of thinking and the most historical value derivative, then if that's not important to you or you want to choose something different, you can gain a huge advantage here. And I want to hop to pricing next in this section, and then we'll talk about what the city offers itself, because the pricing divide here is even greater than Tampa. It's a simpler conversation, but it's a larger divide, which might also be a larger opportunity. So if you follow me here, so like I said, Port Charlotte, we'll talk about that first, but look at the value or the median sales price of Port Charlotte quarterly, right? You're creeping in and out of the low 3s and upper 200,000s, and this thing is just chock full of bay and Gulf beaches, and you get closer to Naples. So you have Naples, Fort Myers, Lower Sarasota, all at your disposal. But look at the juxtaposition. So Englewood, which again is deemed like several steps on the totem pole down if you're shopping Sarasota. Like if you ask anyone, and even the most realistic person, it's a choice. It's very intentional. You don't accidentally end up in Englewood. But look at the price difference there. But then hop across to the right. Sarasota, I mean, double the price on average. That's probably going to get more egregious, right? Because Sarasota is hard to live in the center of. It's just so much around there. It's trickier. Then we get into that later. But then look at Venice. Venice really surprised me. I actually went outside of this database and looked in 2 other databases because I didn't believe what I saw for Venice city limits. And that jump is it's one of the most in vogue areas that exists in the state right now because they built an area called Welland Park. And Welland Park is new construction. It's 18 minutes one way from the beach. It's very, very lovely. It creeps in and out of western Northport, northern Englewood, and southern Venice. But Port Charlotte is not that far from this conversation. And it's very, very coastal at the same time. So I think from a retirement standpoint, I don't know if underrated is the category, but if it's not on your radar, it's extremely underrated. So with that being said, let me hop real quick and finish this section by talking about what the city has to offer itself. I would categorize Port Charlotte as ideal if you were basically seeking a relaxed lifestyle for water enthusiasts, especially without breaking the bank. There's over like 160 miles of canals in this geography, so boating and fishing and even wildlife spotting would be abundant to say the very, very least. Beyond that, you have Charlotte Harbor as a real main feature of the town, so sailing, kayaking, and a lot more when it comes to the general water lifestyle. And then to me, having within reach, lower Sarasota County, Cape Coral, which has more waterfront canals than Venice, Italy, and then Upper Lee County, which is the above Naples and the Fort Myers and Sanibel and Captiva area, to have all of that within a stone's throw gives you some of the best water access and Gulf front beaches, not just in the state of Florida, but to many in the country as a whole, is a pretty compelling offer for maybe less than half the price conservatively. Number 3, we are heading over to the Florida Panhandle, and we are talking about one of my absolute favorites, and that's a place called Navarre. Now, what you need to know to kick things off before we get going is this part of the state is a different bird versus the rest of the Sunshine State. It's this, and then it's all of that. And depending on who you are, that is a good thing, or it could be a negative. Now, to drive that home further locationally, Navarre, our topic of conversation, is about 3 hours one way west of Tallahassee, which is also considered in the same general region, and then just 1.5 hours east of Mobile, Alabama. So that's how far this is over. If you are someone that has either physically visited or dreamed of visiting even the 30A district of the Panhandle, Laguna, Seaside, Rosemary, and beyond, and you fell in love with the idea of the emerald green waters, the sugary white sand, the nature-centric elements, the tranquility and all of that, then I think Navarre, Florida's general region, by going 60 miles the other direction, is really, really sneaky. It is an escape in every sense of the word, how you think of it. You know, not everyone's seeking that more populist thing. And if you wanted to come and have a little bit more, at a fraction of the cost, a more affordable version of just peace, very, very coastal, close-knit community, and a lot of nature that a lot of the more populous beaches in Florida really don't have. They're more like the platted construction kind of feel or the high-rise nature. Then this is super underrated. And then on top of that, you're close to a very lovely town called Gulf Breeze, where I went to, that's where I lived the whole time I was in college. You have Pensacola within reach, which has a lot more going on. You have Destin, which is a more popular tourist destination. So you can get all your jollies without being in it. And I think this strikes an amazing balance. And if you're looking at 30A and you love that, that wouldn't even be in the realm of the realms of conversations when it comes to this video, because Navarre's not half the cost, it's less than that. So wanted to have said that. Let me pull up the prices real quick and we'll talk just for another minute and then we'll move on. So you can see here in Navarre, I pulled up some other options too, just so you can see, because the Panhandle actually has a lot of affordability compared to like the Southwest Gulf Coast. This would be your more affordable Gulf Coast for sure. But it's just a huge divide versus what's expensive and versus what's not. So I just wanted to show you what's not, basically. So Navarre, you can see here, for all of what I described, you can get pretty conceivably at $400,000 or below, depending on what you're doing at the given time. But you also have, which people also enjoy, a place called Fort Walton Beach, and there's South Fort Walton, etc. But Fort Walton Beach is actually a little bit more affordable than that. I just prefer Navarre just stylistically. In this video, I can't get crazy into that, but a lovely option, and you can do more research when it comes to that as well. Pensacola, the city itself, you can see here, pretty affordable as well. And then I just threw Destin on there so you could see an example of a place that's not that far away. 30A wouldn't even make sense if I put the pricing of Seaside or one of these other towns on here. But I would say over a pretty consistent period of time, it is definitely worth a look if you're already looking in this part of the state. Number 4 on our list, we're heading back over to the other side of the Gulf Coast, this time to the Fort Myers, Naples Metro, and we're talking about North Fort Myers itself. And just like I spoke about with number 2, Port Charlotte, I think this is very much another one that people tried to get really close to certain stuff in the state, and then by simply going east and further inland, they saved money, i.e. popularity started being created and started rippling that direction. This just happens to be more of a Naples conversation than a Sarasota one, but this, again, just like the other one, huge divide between the haves and the have-nots from a cost and a stylistic perspective. Now, where they divide big, for me, is I do think pricing, no doubt, is maybe the main factor of why you look in this area in general, especially back in the day. But a lot more people, I think, are choosing this intentionally. Not just because they couldn't get close to the water. So a close second, third is because they want to be a blend of town and country. They don't want to be jammed where everybody else is jammed, and they're seeking something that you can't get in those other areas. And you've seen that with the nearby Babcock Ranch in Lower Punta Gorda, Florida, the first like solar powered town in America. You've seen that tenfold. Not only did the hurricane sweep through and they didn't lose any power because of their grid. So people are like, oh, okay, this is interesting with all the, all that happened there. But, you have like a mini Lakewood Ranch, like a fully master plan area that has STEM schools built in, has autonomous vehicles, has town centers, has basically everything but the beach. And those people necessarily aren't dying to run over to the beach all the time, whether it's lifestyle wise, based on like, if you have 3 kids like me, 2 kids, you can't do that all the time anyway. But it's not on the top of their radar. It's a nice option. It's not the only thing. And I believe that North Fort Myers, being slightly west of the Babcock Ranch Punta Gorda area, gives a nice happy medium of all of it. You could go over there and build a Del Webb house with the Pulte brand. You're right above the river. You're 8, 9, 10 minutes from downtown Fort Myers, and you're parallel to Cape Coral, tons of water. You're parallel to Sanibel, Captiva Island, all the shelling. You could shoot down to Naples. You could shoot up to Sarasota. You could keep going on, but you're a little bit, more insulated from some of the hurricane nature stuff. But also, if you're not someone that chooses that, these resort-style communities now having lagoons and restaurants and lifestyle amenities, it's a really, really compelling offer. So to finish with pricing-wise here, I pulled the one zip code of the one I'm really centered on in North Fort Myers here. You can see here, under $400,000 really consistently. The one zip code that gets you right in the center of Babcock Ranch in Punta Gorda, it crosses over a couple areas. 33982, you can see just the jump in pricing there. There's some luxury homes there. They're getting some more outliers and probably don't have a ton of examples from like if you're running a data set standpoints, but nonetheless, I think that'll keep going in that direction. Naples, crazy, I think this is a little, I checked these numbers 5 times, but Naples has listings of like 250 million next to other listings of 500,000. So I centered on single family homes here for retirement, not condominiums, because that's a different ballgame. But Naples, obviously, either way you look at it, grossly more expensive. And then Cape Coral, which is unanimously affordable for waterfront living, is more expensive than North Fort Myers as well. So something to check out if you like this geography in the state. We have made it to the midway point number 5, and we also are going to head to the Atlantic coast of Florida for the very first time and talk about the fan favorite of St. Augustine. Quick map context. We are about 40 miles south one way of Jacksonville, Florida, a very large city, and also about 50 miles north of Daytona Beach. So that's the area we're hugging. Now, kind of sidebar, when I build videos like this and lists like this, I typically use a combination of structured and unstructured data. I'll start always with just kind of thinking based on my own biases, my own experiences, my own thoughts and preferences, what I would choose on a list like this. I've lived in like 11 cities in the state of Florida, been around a ton. I definitely have my favorites and my not so favorites, but I start there. Then more importantly, I start to layer my customer experiences. I try a lot of, experiments basically, about people tell me this, I do this, and then I have patterns over and over and over, and I see what people choose constantly. But, granted, that's probably layered by some level of bias. And then my background's really in like algorithmic, like databases. So I always, apply that to data, net migration patterns, where the pricing obviously exists already. The other towns that people would compare those to. I'm framing this video, like I mentioned at the very beginning, on retirement. So there's a ceiling on that. But these videos start with like 150, 200 items on the list that I think most people would be like, that's not crazy to say that's considered a retirement town, right? And then, obviously you got to pick 10 and they have their place. When I went to go to St. Augustine, obviously, I know how people feel about it. I know how I feel about it. It's one of those places. I honestly went in thinking I need to find a good alternative to St. Augustine. This part of the state, people think is magic. There's a lot going on there. Well, the cool thing about St. Augustine is that you don't have to find an alternative. I didn't have to make it weird. The pricing's so attractive. And what I would have done to say, like, you should do here instead of here, it's not worth it. It's not worth the change. Like, no one would consider this apples to apples with St. Augustine. Well, what I would also say about that, and I'm going to show you the pricing obviously here in a second, but what I would also say about that would sum up most of the Atlantic coast. You can't get near South Florida, but if you stay above South Florida, most of the Atlantic coast is going to be unanimously more affordable for the primary option that people choose versus a lot of the Gulf Coast. Now, you got to want this area. You got to want this part of the state. It's long too, right? I'm talking lower central all the way up to the northern part of the state. But a lot of times you don't have to pick plan B because plan A is so attractive. So I wanted to mention that. So that's a cool thing. Okay, so let's hop to pricing, and then we'll talk a little bit about who St. Augustine might be right for if you're not completely familiar. So like I mentioned, so we'll start with the St. Augustine pricing here. Go back a little bit during the time when it was like hot, and it might swing in and out of that, was in the mid, 500s. I don't know what you consider cheap, affordable, or whatever, but when you got to the low fours, and especially the way it's trending, I think you might be able to capture magic in a bottle. And if it's anywhere near that, I wouldn't necessarily pick a junior town to save $20,000 or $30,000. If St. Augustine, we know over time, is a very old place, and it will probably be popular for a long time. Nocatee is one where I'm asked about a lot. So Nocatee is this master planned area, if you're not familiar with it. And we'll probably sell the most real estate of anyone individually from like a firm standpoint in Lakewood Ranch, Florida, and also Welland Park. We do a lot of new construction. So the volume is very, very high, and a lot of Southwest Florida. So Nocatee is one that's asked about a lot because people do enjoy like communal amenities, and they can go to one place and get schools and really everything but the beach. And Nocatee is very coastal, which is rare when it comes to new construction. But I was actually surprised by the pricing. I triple checked that as well. Nocatee is actually the place that I would have thought of versus St. Augustine in my mind just off the bat. But it's grossly more expensive, so interesting. But new construction, so maybe there's an in-between there. Jacksonville itself it's a big area, right? So picking the city of Jacksonville is tough from that standpoint. So I didn't break that down further. But you wouldn't choose Jacksonville over St. Augustine. Very different. And then I picked a beach that's above Jacksonville, because a lot of people that when I spoke to about the area, a lot of people guessed that maybe going north would have been cheaper in their mind. So it was just kind of proving that incorrect. But you can also see the cascading price differences in a quarterly model. Very interesting. So this could be a timing play for a lot of people. So again, very interesting. Now, okay, so to round that out, St. Augustine in essence is a really, really unique combination of history, charm, beach proximity, and Florida paradise. It's the oldest city that exists. So you have cobblestone streets. If you're a history buff, you have a lot of stuff that you can explore there. But it also sits dead set on the coast. And it's very nature centric. I always liken it to like, I was born in Maryland. I moved to Florida when I was 4. But I used to visit and got really romantic about the Chesapeake Bay area. My grandparents had a house that was right on, that was like, you could see the lighthouse from it, if you're familiar with that area, in Maryland. And my son is actually named Solomon after Solomon's Island. That's near and dear to my heart. But this area does feel a lot more like those northern beaches, kind of like the Outer Banks does a little bit too, like versus like what I'm used to. Like I grew up on Siesta Key. So I like a lot of that. I like the charm that comes with it. It's just very, very different. It feels like you're almost in Georgia, like its location. And then you also have Ponte Vedra. You have a lot of golf. Jacksonville is an incredibly huge city. So if you want to get your jollies in the big city and be 40 miles away from living in this, I think that combination is where I really like to pair value. I don't like to just be in a silo. There's a lot of lovely beach towns. But to me, I'm maybe just young enough or something. I have a young family. I can't just do that. I need both. And I would never want to live in a city that's that big all the time. So that's where I think it would be great for. It would be definitely worth checking out versus the Gulf Coast. If you're really just new to discovering Florida, going here and then going to center like Sarasota and then looking at everything else would give you a really good perspective, I think. So that's what I say about number 5. Number 6 on the list, we're talking Melbourne, Florida. And just like St. Augustine, this is another one of why pick the rest if you could pick the best. If I was going to the central Atlantic coast of Florida, the Space Coast, I'd look at Melbourne. And I don't know if I'd veer right now in 2024 unless I needed to. And thankfully, from a pricing standpoint, we don't need to right now. So that's a luxury we can afford. If you're unfamiliar with the location, you're 2 hours south of our number 5, St. Augustine. And the southern bookend, you're about an hour, 45 minutes north of West Palm Beach. And then east to west, it's kind of narrow in this part of the state. If you shot straight across the state, you are almost parallel exactly to Tampa Bay, which was our number 1 when we talked about Sun City Center. So let's hop to pricing real quick, and then we'll talk about the city itself. So really attractive. Melbourne, again, I was a little shocked, just like St. Augustine. I knew it was affordable, but it's attractive. So all the way back to Q2 2022, we're talking $345,000, and we're sitting at $335,000 in Q1 of 24. I threw in Palm Bay just for comparison's sake. Palm Bay is in the conversation. It sits right below it. So if you're looking in this area, it might be in play. It's on a lot of people's list for retirement. So I want to include it in it. And if you look at where it's at, it's right there. So these are one and the same, kind of. Also very attractive. Port St. Lucie, granted, an hour below this, an hour to the south. That is on a ton of retirement lists. I know a lot of people are attracted to it. I went to college when I was playing baseball early on in the West Palm Beach area, so I was always over there when I was into the surf culture. And so I wanted to throw that just so you could see. Now, if you're looking at Melbourne, you might be looking at Port St. Lucie if you're still in the macro standpoint. But I wanted you to see the pricing because that's on a ton of retirement blog lists world. So you can see how attractive Melbourne is in comparison. And then Vero Beach is in the same thing. So Vero Beach, let's say if Port St. Lucie is an hour below Melbourne to the south, then Vero Beach maybe is 45 minutes. And you can see the huge price disparity as it's becoming in vogue. I mean, look at the jump from Q4 2022 in 1 year to Q1 2024. Now, there's some anomalies probably in there, but you can see the trend of where it's at. So interesting overall. Now, when it comes to just Melbourne in general, there's nothing crazy to know about. I said a lot of the perks that St. Augustine does as well. Affordability for coastal lifestyles, the Atlantic coast, claim to fame. You have beach proximity pretty close by, the St. Johns River. You have a lot of that stuff going on, safe, affordable. You have a downtown. You have the Brevard Zoo. You got a lot of that stuff going on. The interesting thing here that from like a unique standpoint is the job market's kind of interesting. You have, obviously the Space Coast. So if you could be a space enthusiast, I don't know. I'm not particularly, but you could be. If you are, then you obviously have that going on. Just from an engineering, tech, software, and weirdly entrepreneurship wise, you have some high paying jobs because of the particular skill set to a very affordable coastal town. What I want, it's not a big city that jamming tech jobs into because of the particular industry. So there could be some fragility with that other than the Space Coast idea. But if you get a high paying job with this kind of affordability, I mean, it's not calling your shots, but I think it is an attractive versatility there, I would say. So that's what I say about Melbourne for number 6. Let's hop to number 7. Number 7 on my list is a place in Central Florida called The Villages. If you happen to not be familiar with this name, this is the #1 overall master plan community in the entire state of Florida. And the community would be probably a conservative view on things. It's been ranked on many lists, including top 50 best places to retire overall, amongst other things. To me, this is Pleasantville. It has home styles for most people. It has prices for most people, amenities for most people, restaurants, golf on site, pickleball, tennis, everything, that much more than that. It's really... where it stands out the most is the intentionality of the residents and the social aspect. In my opinion, it's either for you or it's not. It's not a place you randomly happen upon. It's chosen, and the people there are excited they're there, and they're excited you're possibly coming there because it's more than just things to do. It's social engagements. It's clubs. It's people that want to be around each other and get more than just random new construction neighborhoods that are strewn aside each other. So I think that's how I'd kind of sum that up. Now, location, I think, is also unique because of where this sits. It could be random if you don't choose the area you were seeking. So, for instance, if you were looking at the Villages, you probably only, if you're not from Florida, you might only end up in this part of Florida because you were seeking this one community. You're not there's not 50 other things to look at next to it. Hence why it's also affordable. Because what it gets you is both north of Tampa to the west and both north of Orlando to the east. So you're kind of close to two big cities, but you also get well north of the reasonable Gulf beaches. If you're on the Gulf Coast, not next to the water, but actual beaches, the northernmost tip of beaches kind of end at Clearwater Beach and Calidisi Island. You go north of that, you have Hudson, Newport Richey, you're still next to water, but not the Gulf beaches like you would think about them. Not Longboat Key and Siesta Key and St. Pete Beach. Different than that. They're not barrier islands. They end there. So when you go parallel to this area, you hit Crystal River. And that's what Villages talked about on their website and that kind of thing. So that's an option. But where I see this, and I'm going to pull up the pricing here so we can talk about it. Where I see if you're looking at this area, you might look at the Villages and say, what else would I look at? It's typically people that would be seeking something very, very particular, like this master plan area. Like I'm going for broke on this one. Or they're seeking the fringe, kind of an alternative lifestyle to very, very large metros. Tampa's big, and so is Orlando's even bigger. But you might be seeking like a more, you like this part of the state, but a more desolate version of it, quieter, definitely more affordable, but more quaint in some fashion. So a couple examples for me would be, if you're looking at Orlando, for instance, like Mount Dora pops up. If I'm looking at retirement, I want some affordability, and I'm okay with getting a little bit on the outskirts. I want nature, I want by lakes, and I'm not that far from the Gulf Coast. Mount Dora's in that conversation, and it's just right below this area. Ocala is another one. Ocala is like kind of horse country in Florida. It's actually I think it's kind of underrated. I obviously don't live there, but it is kind of lovely. It's kind of a mix of like old money, massive farm. I mean, you can't even call them really, can't call them really homes. They're manors, sprawling and beautiful areas. And it's like more of a throwback in time place in Florida. So Ocala, I mean, you have a place called On Top of the World. If you've ever heard of that, a lot of people retire there as well. So anyway, I wanted to throw that out there. Like I'll show on a map here at the same time, but I wanted to throw out that if you didn't choose the villages, this would be the context of the geography. But all of that's affordable up there. It's affordable for a reason, because you got a little too far in people's minds from what they were trying to get close to, which was the other cities. And if you get north of Tampa and northwest of Orlando, a lot of people consider there's nothing really north of it. Just like there's nothing south of Naples besides the Everglades. That's where this area really sits, because you could get into abyss really quick if you weren't seeking particular homes. I don't really have a preference on any of them. I just wanted to explain the geography in the most biased minds of the people. And then with all of that being said, the villages, like you can see my median sales cost here is in the fours. Now, shades of gray when new construction comes into play. If you're actively shopping, a lot of that's not reported well. But again, affordability in general won't be your problem up in this area. Ocala's really affordable as well. And you have anomalies there as well. And then fringes of Orlando going in this direction are affordable. And then Crystal River would be far more affordable than your Tarpon Springs. And then you have Clearwater Beach. You have Dunedin as you go further south. So it's the same kind of methodology I've been speaking about the whole time. That's my number 7. Number 8 on the list, we are hopping back to the east coast of Florida, and we're talking Miami/South Florida, and I'm going with Deerfield Beach. So just to frame this is another one that when we talk about affordable retirement or cheap retirement, you need to take it with a grain of salt, just like many parts of the Southwest Gulf Coast. But if I'm starting off and I'm saying what's ideal in, let's say, Miami, I might say Aventura or Sunny Isles, Key Biscayne. If I'm working my way up a little further north in South Florida, I might say Boca Raton. When I'm looking at trying to find someone an advantage, or saying like what is a cheaper alternative or an advantageous alternative to what they're also trying to achieve, my mind for the last probably 6 months has really stuck on the Delray Beach idea. A little less developed, much more up and coming, a lot cheaper in direct comparison to maybe the closer to the heart of Miami version. And running the prices, I just couldn't quite do it as far as everything included, right? This is a vast area. It's a little tricky in the eye of the beholder. But that's where I fell a little bit to the very close by Deerfield Beach. So if you look at the pricing here, you can see, again, I said grain of salt, so you can't get mad. But Delray Beach, in the 7s and the 6s consistently, right? This is South Florida, so you got to remember that. But Deerfield Beach, a little bit more affordable. And then you can see like Boca Raton right next to it. And I don't even know if people would guess that Boca is necessarily this expensive overall, but very close by. You could see kind of the comparison. And then even like a Pompano Beach, you start to wonder like, oh, should I just do that? It's so close by. But you're going to find that Delray and Deerfield don't feel like Pompano. So again, none of these are right or wrong. It's just being aware. If you're not super familiar with an area, you know how it is. You get over there. A couple of days drive through doesn't feel like what it does day to day. So you just need to understand where this sits in the grand scheme of things. And this particular area could be very confusing to look at. This is the reason that I divided it by geography, because, I mean, most people aren't going to drive 4 hours north and be anywhere on the Atlantic coast just, because it's 300K versus 500K. So I'm saying these are the sections that people are already moving to. And I'm really trying to fight to say, would you have a similar lifestyle in these areas for half the price as you would in areas that are also considered in the area you're targeting? And that's how I happened upon this. I think Delray and Deerfield, especially Delray, extremely similar to a lot of the Miami-centric lifestyles. It's not that far away to go up and down, and I think that could be compelling if you had this on your radar as well. Number 9 on my list is Daytona Beach, Florida. We are heading back to the East Coast for our final trip, and this just goes to show, like I mentioned, from south of Jacksonville to north of South Florida, the broad affordability of this part of the state is plentiful. And this is no different. And this was actually aggressively affordable. So lifestyle-wise, you have, like many of them, you have water galore, beaches. You're less than an hour one way to Orlando here. So that's interesting as well. Golf, NASCAR, Daytona 500. You have all of that kind of thing. And if we hop to pricing for a second, Daytona, you can see here in the, $311,000 median cost in Q1 of 2024. But all the way back a year, still really affordable. You might also be looking at like similar beach towns in your mind. New Smyrna Beach is brought up a lot. That one is pretty affordable as well. Daytona is cheaper. Orlando, the city center, Daytona is almost 200,000 plus cheaper than that, just 1 hour away. And this is much more coastal. And then Cocoa Beach is grossly more expensive overall. And I'm not sure a lot of people would necessarily guess that when you speak to them. But Daytona Beach serves as my number 9 as another possible option for you to explore. And let's hop to one more. Number 10 on our list, we have made it, and that is Gulfport, Florida. If you're not familiar with this area, we are back in Tampa Bay, which is where we started, the origin story. So number 1 on our list was in Tampa Bay, and it was a place called Sun City Center. That was inland. So this is a coastal version. So again, Tampa Bay has 3 counties. Pinellas County is the coastal county. So I wanted to fight to give you an option that would satiate this need, that would not the promise of the video, but the general value proposition of this video. It would do that. And because I know how lovely this could be. I know how you can have a whole oasis on coastal, like St. Petersburg, coastal, Pinellas County of Tampa Bay, but then to have the whole city. And I've lived that lifestyle for years ago. So I was trying to do that. And my first thought originally was Madeira Beach. So the one thing about this area, a bunch of barrier islands, but typically are a lot more affordable versus its sister Sarasota. It's not to the whole world, but to its sister Sarasota. And there's a lot more than just St. Pete and Clearwater Beach. And Madeira a lot of times is in that conversation of affordability. However, I could not in right mind do that with the prices I'm about to show you. So then I started venturing off the beaten path and looked at some towns I love, like Dunedin and Safety Harbor. I'm going to go long form here because it's the last one. Dunedin and Safety Harbor, which are more like throwback towns. One's on the bay, one's on the Gulf. Not really beach towns because they're above Clearwater Beach, but that didn't quite work. And then I settled on Gulfport as an in-betweener. And one of the great things about this area is that, the thing about like St. Petersburg, as you think about it, the downtown is on the bay. Might be opposite camera here, but downtown's on the bay, and then the Gulf's over here. So you're going east to west to achieve most of what the town has to offer in the minds of the people. And it's very far south. Downtown St. Pete and St. Pete Beach are very far south. Well, Gulfport sits dead smack in the middle of a narrow area. So you look left, you have the beach, you look right, you have the downtown. And that's really what offers a lot of what the town offers. And the further you get south, you get just close to water in general below it because you have to go over bridges to get to Bradenton in the Sarasota Metro. So I think Gulfport could be really interesting, especially if you're looking for something different. This is a peacock. That's the best way to describe it. It is an eclectic area. It's artists and authors and pastel colors. It's a different place. If you haven't been there, it's definitely worth checking out to see if it's for you or if it's not. But I picked it because of the pricing and the in-between nature of it, because if it's not Gulfport for you, if you can mirror the value prop of what I'm describing, it's really interesting because a lot of this particular area gets you where you gain something and you lose something large. You gain affordability, you lose the town. And it might not be a trade-off you want to venture into, right? So if we look at the pricing here, Gulfport, you can see in the mid-low 4s, and you're around $1 million beach towns all over the place. Even Madeira Beach, which is one of the most in between, kind of affordable beach towns, I guess, compared to the most popular ones, was double the price in Q1. Dunedin, again, which is another one where that would be one where you gain this and lose the rest of the town because it gets further north, but lovely area. I really like it. Is more expensive. And then I threw on Oldmar. So Oldmar, we'll show on a map here. Oldmar is another in-betweener area, just because I only have 10 on the list, I'm going to give you an extra one. Oldmar is one where it's on the Hillsborough County. It's on the Tampa side. But if you sit on Hillsborough, what it gains you is when I said Gulfport is left beach, right is downtown St. Pete. Well, Oldmar gives you, because it sits right below the bridge, it's left Clearwater Beach, right downtown Tampa, down St. Pete Beach. So Oldmar, Town and Country, that area would be interesting as well. But I can't do everything in this video. This is a bad kind of video for me. So I want to end it right there. And if you give me just a minute, I want to tell you some free stuff we have going on, some stuff you might be interested in. And if not, thank you so much for watching, and let's wrap. All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed our take on retirement and affordability. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel if you've not already done that. If you haven't grabbed that Southwest Florida guide, please do that. It's in the description box below. Just a great way to quickly say, is it Tampa, is it Naples, Fort Myers, Sarasota, what may it be? We try to juxtapose those, and that's a really good way to compare across the state as well. It's a good example of the type of cities within the state. On a more narrow version than that, the best thing you can do beyond that is I have a 130-day report. I really hate the spam email stuff, so you're not going to get that if you reach out to us. But I have a report that is a more narrow, comprehensive version of everything here, basically. So it's all of individual insight when it comes to the market, new construction homes, what's going on, trends, all those kind of things. In addition to that, we have some really cool things. We list basically all the current new construction incentives available, both to us as an organization privately and to the public. Quick move-in homes for new construction builders, interesting things going on with MLS and resales, anything else in our world that we think we can add an advantage to a relocation buyer or a local seller. So that is in the description box below as well. So those are the two main things. If I can help you, of course, anywhere in the real estate market, I own a brokerage called the Sunshine State Company. It's full-scale residential brokerage, buying, selling, and/or investing. You can reach out with all the contact information below. You can schedule a call on your timeline on our Calendly integrated calendar on the website. Speaking of the website, the sunshinestateco.com or the sunshinestatecompany.com, either one works. It's a place where you can watch more, read more, listen more, and research more, basically. So on YouTube, it's very hard to navigate like all the videos. If you like this one, you want to look at other ones or different ones or certain areas. The website's a better version of that. We blog most, if not all, of our videos, and then we blog different stuff too. So if you want to do a 5-minute read version of this, then that's on there. If we don't already, very soon here, we're going to have an audio only version. So it's a great, if you're in your car, this is on YouTube and you want to pause, you want to, I'm an audio person. So if you just want to listen in the background, that's a good move for someone like me that talks a mile a minute. And then also we have like normal MLS searches, all that kind of stuff. We can set you up in addition to that, but there's a lot of things you can do on your own before you're ready to talk to someone. So check that out. Most importantly, I really, really appreciate the support. It's not lost on me if you made it this far. Thank you guys so much for taking a little bit of your very valuable time to watch any of my content. And if I can help you in any way whatsoever when it comes to the state of Florida, please reach out and we'll see you soon.